Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle and the great PNW, the Pacific Northwest. If you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here, it's the podcast for you, the podcast of record. It's where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is Craig Swanson. Our guest is Carol Bowser from Conflict Management Strategies. Since 2002, when she founded her business, Carol has helped leaders and organizations become conflict competent. We'll probably talk about that. She says, I love creating spaces where people can talk about what is important and giving them the tools to have those conversations. Carol trains personnel at all levels on the skills to address and navigate through workplace conflict. Carol, welcome to the show. We'll be right with you. Everyone, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, and Craig's favorite, Overcast. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including the mothership in Atlanta. Now, listen, before we bring on Carol, Craig and I have to get caught up. Craig, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
I had a fantastic Thanksgiving.
Did you have, first of all, I got to ask, did you have any conflicts at the Thanksgiving dinner table?
You know, not conflicts, but we were in a small little beach cottage with 4 college students that my son brought home. So just a lot of physical conflicts of trying to figure out where everyone fits. But it was a really good Thanksgiving. Other than figuring out like what turkey and like who gets the dark meat, it all worked out.
We have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old granddaughters, and there are occasional conflicts between them, but that for another day. You know, we're going to be bringing Carol here on, and we're going to be talking about conflict management, and it made me think back to the days when I was actually an employee, and that goes back now 17 years. And I know that you, like I am, are an entrepreneur, and that you probably at one time were an employee. So this doesn't quite plead the fifth, but do you have a memorable moment as when you were not the boss, you were an employee, and there was a conflict?
I mean, the biggest learning conflict I had was that we had a video production team, and I would step in as the boss because I had no one telling me no and completely disrupt their operations. And I had a producer that I respect tremendously take me to the side and basically educate me on how disruptive that was to the team. And we negotiated that she was the one person in the company that could tell me no. And she basically had that card, and she was the one person that could override me. And I granted her that responsibility, and it made the team work better.
Wow. Well, mine is a little bit different. When I was working for an insurance agent back 17 years ago, one of the bosses had made a decision that we should have a mission statement, which is fine. Mission statements are good. In fact, I was on the team that put it together. But then he wanted to ingrain it in everybody. So he wanted everybody in the organization to memorize it, like we were third graders or something. And he was going to pay everybody $50 to do it. Well, I didn't need the $50. And I thought actually that the whole process of forcing people to memorize it was actually anti-mission statement. It felt like it was, and so I refused. He didn't like that, and I didn't like the other part, and so a little conflict. In the end, I ended up firing him at some point in the next not too distant future because I realized I don't think I was a very good employee, so I decided to go off on my own. But that was kind of the last conflict I think I had.
I just want to say that, spoken like a true entrepreneur. You fired him. You quit. You fired him.
I did fire him. I left. You always, it's funny. Sometimes you fire one boss and you go to a worse one, and that worse one probably was me at sometimes. But anyway, yes, I spoken like a true entrepreneur. Okay, enough of us, Craig. We got to bring on Carol. Because Carol, I don't know if you can fix either Craig or me, but my guess is that you have fixes and solutions to conflicts similar to the ones that we said. So first of all, welcome to the show, and tell us, how did you get so good at getting rid of conflicts?
Oh, well, thanks so much for asking. So I used to be an employment lawyer. I'm a recovering attorney.
Oh.
But before I went to law school, I did mediation training at a community mediation center where they were really focused on talking about what's important to people and how do you get people to the table, but how do you get them with space and structure talking about what's important. And I realized that's what I really liked. So I got the imprint of a community mediator dealing with relationships and like high levels of emotion and what people bring to it, their conflict style, power dynamics. And that was so much more fun than practicing law. So I ditched practicing law and started doing the stuff that I really liked and I thought was more impactful. And I love the fact your little examples that you got going here of that. I just love that. And the doctor is in.
The doctor's
in
in.
to the table, and we can talk about how your personal values, Dan, of autonomy and respect were affronted, and how that led to you exercising your core value of autonomy and firing your boss. And then
Is that what I did? Now I'm confused. Is that exact? I did all of that cool stuff.
You did totally all that stuff. I just looked at that. I'm like, you basically, your conflict was that felt disrespectful. It felt like he wasn't treating me like an adult. He demanded that I memorize something. It's like, I'm an autonomous thinking human being, and that's a core value. And that core value is not going to be negotiated. And you were kind of made a decision that this is not a relationship that's worth pursuing. So you're like, hit the road, Jack. That I'm not going to change who this person is, and I don't see negotiating this, so I'm going to make a different choice. That's resolving the conflict, And then Craig, you're like, hey, when you put on your little hat of, I'm not seeing anyone take charge. Power abhors a vacuum, so I'm going to step in. And what you end up having was a roles conflict of there were defined roles and boundary and power dynamics going on there that you decided you're going to make it up. And you're the boss, like, honey, let me take you aside and let me tell you about like the invisible culture that we have going on here. And I'm going to make the invisible visible. And here's the authority you have. Here are the guidelines that this team operates under with, and you need to stay within those lines in the road. Absolutely. So there we go. All right,
it's 12:07. We're done.
Yeah, thank you very much. Efficient. So yeah, that's going back to the original question. I just found it so much more engaging and multidimensional. And to speak about the practicing law, I think that language limits us because we call it the justice system. But what it is, it's a dispute resolution system that's very formalized and tends to disempower and disengage the people who are actually involved and impacted. And we call it justice, but justice is very idiosyncratic. Justice is very much tied to our personal core values, and it may be tied to how you were brought up in your family of origin or your families of origin. And oftentimes we bring habits, patterns, beliefs, assumptions to the workplace. And so that's one of the things that I look for about values.
All right. So I've got a question about conflict resolution or whatever we're calling it. So is the goal to remove the conflict, or is the goal to create enough honest understanding of people's perspective that the conflict issue can remain, but people's perception of it as a negative thing goes away? I mean, where is this spectrum? What is conflict resolution? Maybe is what I'm asking.
So I think to your point, I think a lot of people have a lot of different definitions. Some people are like, just make them do what I want them to do, sit down, shut up, get on my bus or get off. Others are maybe their idea of what even conflict resolution is like, let's get a better understanding. Let's get a dialogue. And the dialogue in itself and the conversation in itself is what they embody as conflict resolution. So you bring up a really important point that I talk a lot about with my clients is we use terms like communication, professionalism, respect, trust, collaboration. Kills me. But the thing, and I'll give a caveat, I think collaboration is awesome, but these are abstract concepts, but how we go about delivering those and what behaviors people think either support collaboration or respect or detract, we never really get to that. So the first kind of takeaway is that I ask my clients is, does everyone have the same definition of what conflict resolution is? And I bet that they don't. So I'm going to give you my lawyer answer, Craig.
Mhm.
It depends.
And
So I'm wondering, Carol, in the last couple of years since this little thing called COVID-19 and the pandemic hit, people all of a sudden are working not next to each other, but virtually in hybrid fashion, or whatever we want to call it. And I've got to believe that, a lot of conflict is caused by miscommunication and the inability to resolve things kind of the old-fashioned way of, hey, I'm sitting next to Carol, she's here, I'm gonna have to deal with this, I'm gonna have to see her, I'm gonna have to talk this out, and we're gonna have to figure it out one way or another. But when you are removed in a virtual environment, I've got to think that makes it harder. Have you seen changes in what you do over the last 2 years?
I would say yes, but same, but different. So I think a lot of conflict, people don't want to have the conversation. And I have yet to see an employee handbook that doesn't say, go and talk to the person, resolve it at the largest level. But you ask people, it's like they're going to come up with 99 reasons why not to. I'm afraid of retaliation. I don't know what they're going to say. It's going to escalate it. It's not worth the time and the energy. That there are actually as many reasons and similar reasons why people aren't going to have the conversation as there were before. Yet we need to have, but we're utilizing technology differently. And there's some of us that are more comfortable doing it this way, and there's some of us that aren't. And I also find that not naming any names here at all, but when people say we're going back to work, we're all coming in, I want people to ask, is it because my management and my supervisory skills are dependent on people being in person, physical proximity, that I physically own the space and I can go door to door and I can compel people to go together? So is it that we need to develop new skills, for what we're looking for, what we're reacting to, and how we manage and supervise and create a culture when it's done hybrid or done like this? So same, but different. So I don't know if that's encouraging or that's like, same damn mess as before. Come on. I thought if we just brought everybody together and knock some heads about, or just one of my favorites is, they're adults, they should figure it out. And I kind of pause. I use the power of the pause and think about like, well, if they knew how to, don't you think they would have done that already? I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
so when you're working with companies or leaders, so actually, first of all, what level are you working on? Are you working one-on-one with the leaders to understand how they can lead and deal with conflict? Are you setting up systems within the company that help kind of manage conflict management? What level do you get in at? And really, like, where do you have the most impact in companies?
So what I do, I kind of work in various different levels. One, with the executives and also kind of the senior leadership, because if there is conflict or they are frustrated or annoyed or feel as though their colleagues are impeding their work, that cascades down throughout the organization. And it, if this is a technical term, it becomes a big hot mess. Because then you have, people feeling impeded. Then there's kind of the second layer where we may have people who say, I need to develop my executive skills or my senior leadership skills because it's a different because you have to manage through other people. And then there's like, Carol, we have a problem and we need for you to come in and talk with these folks. And sometimes it's just bringing everybody together for, general professional development.
All right, so I've got a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Because you said a leader needs to lead through other people, or a manager needs to manage through other people.
Yes.
So, is it on me as a leader then to figure out myself and figure out addressing conflict? Is it getting the right people in the right seats and getting rid of all those people who are in conflict with the organization?
I am so glad you asked that, because I always have a visceral reaction to that. So the answer is yes. And so, yes, you need to understand kind of what your foibles are, what your approach to conflict is. And also, because if you're a leader, if you avoid, or if you minimize, or if you hint around stuff, or if you're overly direct, and you're damaging relationships, the leader's comfort or discomfort with conflict is absolutely going to influence the culture. And it might be a dark side of the culture, meaning that maybe we value harmony and we avoid, and love collaboration. Well, that means, are you sending the message that don't rock the boat, be nice, and nice is great, but nice can also hold a whole lot of bad. Then on, the other part of it, what was the other part of it? I got so excited about what I was saying about.
I mean, effectively, is it me or them? It's like, is my problem that I don't know how to lead, or is my problem that I got a bunch of people that just don't know how to follow, and I need to replace them?
On the bus thing.
Yeah.
So again, it kind of depends. In that, our audience here is kind of entrepreneurs, right? And so you're kind of leading it. So chances are you don't have an ingrained workforce. There isn't a collective bargaining, there aren't civil service agreements. And even though union shops are less than about 11% of all employees, a lot of the management books are geared toward, this is an at-will employment state, and you can hire and fire at will. Similarly speaking, maybe like Dan here in Washington State, we're an employment at will state. You can leave for any reason, a good reason, a bad reason, no reason at all, so long as it's not an illegal reason. Yet the challenge being that if you're trying to grow your organization, I think having conversations about what type of protocols, or I call them guidelines, what kind of guidelines about how we want to handle conflict here. And, it's more than just a handbook. It's like, how do we expect people to respond to when we bring up issues? And I have seen more family businesses, more long-term owners will just say, I can't fire this person. What is that going to say about me as a leader if I see any disagreement and I start hacking people off? How am I going to develop that institutional knowledge? How am I going to develop that flow? How am I going to develop that culture? And I think it is that conflict resolution muscles are just underdeveloped muscles that people have. And as a leader, being able to develop, because relationships get stronger through conflict so long as you can move through it, don't get caught in what I term as the sucking vortex of pissed off and just say, we're in conflict, we're in conflict, we're in conflict, and all those self-reinforcing behaviors. But how do we get through it so that way we're stronger and we're developing an institutional memory, guidelines and ground rules about how we handle stuff here. I just people's autonomy.
Yep. I just love that big hot mess and sucking vortex of pissed off or official words. I just love those. I like that. What I also love is we got to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with Carol Bowser for a hot or not section of the show, we're going to find out if conflict is healthy. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. EO Accelerator is a coaching program for Seattle area business owners who want to grow their existing small businesses beyond $1 million in annual revenue. As a small business owner, you face new challenges every day, maybe even a few conflicts. Whether it's deciding how you're going to fill a rush of new orders, puzzling out where to find new customers, or sweating about making payroll, do you find yourself wishing you had an instruction manual for your business? At EO Accelerator, our mission is to empower entrepreneurs with the tools, accountability, and community to aggressively grow and master their business. This is more than theory. This is Entrepreneurs Helping Entrepreneurs, with top Seattle business leaders who have been where you are, volunteering as coaches and mentors in the Accelerator program. Because the hustle will only get you so far. The next level of success is a team sport. Want to hit $1 million in revenue? Then join the club, EO Accelerator.
All right. Thanks for that read, Dan. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, everyone, where we are interviewing the best and the brightest from around the Puget Sound area. And Carol Bowser today is bringing it to us with conflict resolution. And we're getting into this fun part, hot or not.
I think we might need to cause a big hot mess or cold hard facts. Maybe we got to go. We'll see how that works out. Carol, this is where Craig and I pepper you with questions about business, about life, about who knows what else. You'll find out. We'll ask you if it's hot or not, and then why or why not. And as we were going to break, I said, is it healthy? So hot or not, Carol? I'll put it this: hot or not, conflict is healthy.
Oh, passe. It's not. Let me tell you why. Because I work with a lot of organizations, and for all of you out there who I've worked with or work in the future, I love the fact that you're talking about that conflict, difference of opinions, different values, different priorities, different systems, processes, goals, things like that, that when those clash or they seem internally inconsistent, that causes conflict. And being able to recognize that and talk about it in terms that can gather people in and recognize that at its core, people want to feel successful at work. And if they feel impeded at work, that's going to cause conflict. However, I think it's become a bit of a platitude. And this is why, because every person I've heard saying that tends to be a senior leader, and they tend to be the most powerful person in the world. Therefore, not in the world, maybe in their own lives,
world,
the most powerful person in
world.
the room, or the highest paid person in the room. And so therefore, I think that the risk to them bringing forward troubling ideas is less. There's not necessarily a fear of retribution there. So it's like, well, we want people to do it. And I would say, well, how was conflict handled in your family growing up? Was it safe? What kind of risk of being put on a bad boy or a bad girl, or that guy or that girl, or, oh Lord, she is so annoying type of list is there for you? And if you're the boss, you're not leaving unless you've got, employees like Dan who are going to fire you. So I think it is well intended, but I think it's overused. I think recognizing the power dynamics and trying to ask the question, well, what would prevent people from coming forward to talk about things that are important, is maybe a different. And I'll follow on. When I say conflict, what do you think of? Sunshine, puppy dogs, rainbows, hot chocolate, crusty bread, s'mores. No. So you're dealing with decades of an ingrained response that you need to come over. So maybe talk about, conversation, dialogue, addressing concerns, easy substitution, and more pulling people into the conversation versus pushing them back.
All right. For my hard not, I actually want to kind of pick up on something Dan said about facts versus, he was talking about the facts.
Yeah.
So what is hotter? Facts or perceptions?
Perceptions, because you're bringing I don't want to say emotional baggage, but you're bringing a lifetime of experience in to interpret the facts. And I often talk to my clients, I still say something like, well, someone doesn't say hello to me. And I was like, okay, well, that fact is symbolically significant to you, that it means something. What does that mean? Does it mean I feel disrespected? Does it feel they're just rude? Does it feel that they're socially isolating me? That the facts are important, but trying to figure out why that particular fact is symbolically significant. I mean, like, why is it a big deal? It's like some people would say, like, leave me the heck alone. I've had managers say, Carol, I'm walking through the space back when we were all in an open space. Don't even get me started in open space, office things. And it's like, it would take me an hour to get if I stopped and said hello to everybody. Do I have to say hello? And the answer is no. but figure out what's important for people to feel seen and heard by you and do that.
All right. I've got one for you. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit. I know you can handle it.
Bring it. Bring
Hot
it.
or not? Hot, is this a hot mess or is it cold? I don't know. Hot or not? Keeping politics and religion out of workplace conversations.
Well, so here's why I'm going to deny the premise of the question, Dan,
Okay.
because I think it's hot and not. One
Okay.
is because religion and politics are closely tied to people's core values.
Yeah.
And certain actions or certain people are symbolically significant, meaning that they are supporting that core value that I have, or they're undermining that core value that I have. And so it can get to a hot mess. And I will just get on my little soapbox here for a second. I think our American culture does not a great job of distinguishing between debate, because we'll say, well, debate, but debate means that you have a neutral third party saying you formed a better argument. And what we end up doing is taking critiques as very personal, saying your logic isn't correct, your thinking isn't correct, you have a gap here, and that is personal. So if we can't handle that conversation or redirect it to be able to say, hey, well, tell me about what this candidate or what this thing, why is that really meaningful to you? Tell me about, if you're okay with it, tell me about like what kind of led you, did you start there? Did you develop there? And then so what you're looking for is trying to figure out what value is there. And you can go and say, I think we share similar values, but we have different ways of expressing it that I think this supports this, and I think that you think it supports in a different way.
I want to break a little bit out of the hot or not, because you actually made me think of something. I'm thinking about building company culture. Mm-hmm. And I think like 10, 20 years ago, and I'd be building company culture, I would be attracting people that look and think like all the people that we've hired before. And so what we actually have is kind of this monochromatic company culture that feels consistent because everybody is coming from a very similar background. And what are the strengths versus weaknesses of that versus how do you build a company culture that doesn't necessarily bring everybody from a similar starting place?
Yeah, I think it's along lines first kind of recognizing of, am I having a connection with this person because they think the same, they value the same. That's one piece. And then just being able to use, I think, I'm not sure if your prior guest, Michael Ann Valterra, shared with you the power of the pause, but she'll say like, take a moment to pause and just maybe ask yourself the question of, am I drawn to this person because they are so similar to me? I mean, if you look at like, do they want to achieve the same things I want to achieve? That's great. Do they seem to have a similar work ethic? That's great. But are we resonating with people that we're getting so much that our bandwidth is pretty small, versus asking yourself, like, I'm feeling friction with this person. Or maybe you might say, oh, I'm a great strategic thinker, but I need a tactical thinker. I see this all the time. And then I will say, they said, well, we need them now to be more strategic. And I said, well, didn't you hire them to be a tactical thinker? And they said, yes. So if I like the image of a yin and a yang, that you've got a black and a white, and there's a bit of a black in the white and a bit of the white in the black, that unless you can have a culture and the conflict resolution or the communication skill set along that border, instead of it being a smooth, seamless, well-oiled, and also well-respected border, it ends up becoming rough, like a blister. Unresolved conflict is like a blister, and it is hurtful, it's painful, and you spend a lot of time trying to prevent pain, therefore avoiding the conversation. So being able to ask, like, okay, if I'm bringing people who have a different approach, have different priorities, a different way of learning, a different way of communicating, how can we have proactive conversations about how we're going to manage that, knowing that we're different? And then also, who's got ultimate decision-making authority? That's a big one.
So I have a question as we, before we head into break, I've got a question regarding the law of large numbers. So,
Okay.
I used to try to think, well, the more employees there are, the more, that means more drama. but it also means the smaller ones, there's kind of no place to hide. Is there a difference between the 10-person employer, 30, 70, 100? Where does similarities and differences come into play?
So I think smaller organizations and smaller teams, they feel the conflict more acutely because there is no place to hide, or if somebody is hiding, everybody knows it. Or we try to get into, well, it's Camp Carol versus Camp Dan, and that causes a lot of it. The other thing with the smaller organizations, we know each other. So I think we expect more flexibility, more latitude, or maybe even more forgiveness and more grace than we would in a larger organization. And kind of the larger, it's sometimes department to department conflict, but that's usually because whatever communication process or system or policy we have, it can cause drag. We're trying to work through too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen. But as you get bigger, you can kind of hide a little bit more. And there are more people that maybe, if Craig and I are going at it, if it's a bigger, we can change our work schedules. We can hang out with different people. We don't necessarily have to interact together. It still may be percolating. I still may be annoyed with Craig. Craig, I'm not annoyed with you at all.
It's always the same between us, Carol.
Yeah. There you go. But I'm going to talk about you behind your back.
Okay.
Because we want to be truthful, right? We want to be
or on social media, right?
Yeah.
Well, listen, we've got to take I can't believe how fast this is going. We've got to take our second short break to hear from our corporate sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Carol Bowser, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to find out where Carol may be falling short on some of her own conflict management style. Don't walk away, but we will be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our great corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, the Kitsap Sun Newspaper Group, BC Fitness Studio, and Upstart Group. Please visit our website, which is kind of brand new and looks pretty good. So go check it out, www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
All right. And welcome back. I just realized I was listening to you talk and I forgot I was the one coming in on this. So I want to welcome everyone back. We're talking with Carol Bowser about conflict resolution in business and life. And this is the Shrimp Tank, where we get to talk to the best and the brightest in the Puget Sound area. Next up is Plead the Fifth.
We're going to turn up the heat.
On board.
We're going to turn up the heat, Carol Bowser. We're gonna see what you got here. We're going to pepper you with some more questions. You can plead the fifth, but only once. And from there, we could get worse. But okay, Carol, I'm just going to bring it up. Plead the fifth. Where are areas that because I'm assuming you're a human like us, even though you have much better skills than Craig and I, which has become painfully obvious, at least to me, when it comes to conflict management and all of that. But I bet there's some areas that in your own life you might fall short on. What are those?
Yeah. What I will say is, even though I teach and train and speak and coach on this, I still struggle with this because it's a muscle, and I don't want to pretend that just because I have a certain set that it's conflict free. My husband will tell you that it is not. But I do think, because I think in terms of values and roles and boundaries, I can express like, this is a value. This is what I think is respectful. So I think I can get a little bit more entrenched because I can use it in those types of terms. But I will say, because of the skill set that I have, I think my conflicts are shorter in duration, lower in amplitude, and happen less frequently. So yeah, still working on that. Usually it has to do with who's doing the dishes. Yeah. And as I will tell you, it's not about who's doing the dishes. It's about something else. So,
I'm curious. This is Plead the Fifth. I'm going to follow up on that, because sometimes the people who are most deeply trained in a subject have the most ability to create an intellectual understanding themselves that kind of like protects them from their emotional side? Like, when you are dealing with conflict, does your training get in the way of you actually being the human being in the middle of it?
Maybe I think so. Cause I kind of get my mediator thing. If I can feel my back getting up, I can feel it going like this. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you what is happening. In fact, I had a conversation with my son's school this morning. He was in the back of the car and he's like, Mom, were you mad at that? I'm like, no, but I want to be very clear on what my expectations are. And I wanted to, say, this is what I see the action item is. And I want to be short, concise, and direct, and then be very, very specific in what my action item is and what their action item is. And the pace, the pitch, the tone, the number of words I use are all designed to kind of bring forward a point. So that way it doesn't get lost. But yeah, I can be difficult.
So without bringing in names, because you can't give client names, we certainly know that. But I bet in the time, I think it was 2002 you started doing this. It's been 20 years. What is the craziest, most unusual, weirdest situation that you've been brought into to help mediate or improve?
I think that there's kind of a category of those. And one is where it has just been going on so long. Like one of the situations where I'm gathering background, I'm like, so how long has this been going on? They're like 18 years. That's tough. And that also tells me that what they're looking for is complete organizational culture change. And oftentimes that I try to be a neutral third person, kind of like a lone wolf. Like, I'm out here, I've got my law background, I've got my background as a mediator privately and is for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I've been an employee, I've been a boss, all of these different perspectives. And I try not to get caught up in the gears of the organization. And sometimes there are just like power dynamics, long-term relationships, who's willing to do what, who's not willing to do what, that my role that I'm brought in for, I can't really touch, but those things are giving fertilizer to what's going on. And so the ones that have been long-term, organizational things like that those have been the most difficult. And sometimes that happens. Well, people will say like, hey, what about communication training? Or do you have team building? Which is a very safe way of saying there is some bad juju going on here. And I think that training might help. And so I asked, like, well, is there a presenting event? Like, what issue are you trying to address with training or team building? And oftentimes if we have communication training, people will come up to me and like respectful workplace or, how to deal with difficult conversations or polarizing conversations that they'll say, well, the one person who needed to be here didn't show up. I'm like, well, of course they didn't. Of course they didn't.
So Carol, I want to follow up really quickly. I love how you cut through and say, well, this is code 4. This is the nice way of saying, and I got to believe people I think they're trying to be sensitive. You hear a lot of talk about that. I think that that's a legitimate effort, but at some point, sometimes you just have to cut through and say, let's just get down to brass tacks. Let's cut through this. This is really saying that this is a big hot mess, or this is how often do you have to just get to that point and say, okay, let's just get directly to the point?
I think that I'm fairly direct. I can be very subtle at the beginning, but then I can be very direct, but I'll say it in a way that people can resonate with. I'll say, it seems like you have, a roles problem here, that the roles and the boundaries and who has decision-making authority, that it's too porous and people don't know what's going on. And like Craig, you've got other people kind of stepping in and stepping on people's toes. But I think that's important. I think I do it a little bit more subtly than saying, look, honey, no. I never think it's never my role to make, employment decisions, but sometimes I can say to people, if we're coaching and there's a problem, I could say, well, you need to decide how much time, money, and effort you're willing to invest in all of this. And that's your decision. And I can give recommendations, but again, I'm an outside consultant. I may have influence, but I have no power. So we just, and what I, and they pay me for my law brain, which I can't turn off. They pay me for my mediator brain. They pay me for my consultant brain. And I want to be able to be true to myself and say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I've heard. And, let's see if we can do something about it.
All right. I think I want to wrap this up, actually, just kind of going a little bit back home. Just, you're done with the day. You dealt with all the conflict you're gonna deal with today. What do you binge watch on the TV?
Oh, there have been a lot. But I also have a middle schooler. So the things that I can watch that don't echo up through the thing but I'm a big Outlander fan. I watched all of those. What I go to over and over again is Somebody Feed Phil. It's on Netflix. It's the guy who created Everybody Loves Raymond, and he is joyful, and he goes all around the world and eats with people, and it's joyful. It's absolutely joyful, and I will go back to it again and again and again. Yeah. I'm trying to think of something else, but that's the top of my mind. And I know that there's another Netflix thing. Oh, I need to go back and what's the one? Better Call Saul. I've got like 30 of those stepped up.
Yeah.
But again, it's just like at the end of the day, I'm tired, and it's a plot-driven, dialogue-driven show where they're dropping little nuggets everywhere that you got to pick up. And so I'll eventually get back to that. But I love those where you can just kind of unwind your brain. Oh, and during COVID, it was Parks and Recreation. I loved that.
Oh, am I going to break?
Yeah, that was.
Oh, yeah.
That was a little note.
That was the power of the pause there.
Now you
Greg.
can
Power of the
see.
pause, like,
I was like leaning in. I was thinking.
Hey,
I was.
hold on. Before you go to ask her, you just made me think of something, Carol. So I'm going to end with this because you mentioned Parks and Rec. Let me ask you this, because I was going to ask you it earlier and then I forgot. One of my favorite all-time shows is The Office, and I just, for those of us who are Office fans, there's some truth. There's a lot of truth. I mean, even though it's exaggerated, maybe there's awful lot of The Office in a lot of offices, aren't there?
Yeah, there is. And to your point, it's exaggerated. And that's why we find it so funny, because it's tragic and humorous. And Ricky Gervais, who is the creator of that, I think he is great. And he said the driving thing with Michael is that he wanted to be liked more than anything else. So his core value was wanting to be liked and to be a friend to other people. And we talked about roles and boundaries, and there's a role and boundary mismatch there when you are the boss. Yeah, that's kind of a common theme of also kind of wanting to do a good thing, but it's different. There are different roles and responsibilities, rights and responsibilities when you're the boss and when you're an employee or even an independent contractor, and getting confused about that gets difficult. So that's why sometimes I say, do you have an employment counsel? It might be a good idea to talk to your employment counsel at this point in time. And then I stay the hell out of it.
Oh, that's it. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us with that last little kind of intimidating note about it. Have you got an employee counsel? Carol, thank you for joining us on the Shrimp Tank. This has been a lot of fun. I just feel like I'm tingling. I just enjoyed this conversation. Can you tell us where people who are listening in are interested in like connecting with you, where they can learn more about you and where they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So I'm somebody a couple of years ago said I was one of the top 30 people to follow on LinkedIn for conflict resolution, where I give articles and curate stuff. I have managingconflict.com, where you can learn more about me and sign up for the conflict tip of the day, a tip, a trick, a technique, a video, all designed to increase people's conflict resolution muscles. And a lot of managers and supervisors tell me it's a really easy entry way to spark conversation. You can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and even there's a new YouTube channel up where there's more tips, tricks, techniques. However, I'm not the Carol Bowser, who is a fitness instructor. I'm Carol Bowser with Conflict Management Strategies.
All right. Wow, that's fantastic. We should have you do the wrap up for the Shrimp Tank too, because that's where everyone should be following us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything else as well. So everyone watching, to catch this replay and all other replays, go to the shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle. Whatever you listen to your podcast in, be it I love Overcast, but the iPhone browser, the Google, whatever it is, listen to us. rate us with a 5-star, and please follow us on the show's social pages.
Craig, I think I finally got to a point that I stopped calling Overcast Outcast. I think I've got it down now. So hey, listen, Carol, I agree with Craig. This has been so much fun. Thank you very much, Craig, as always. And I guess I'll be seeing you next year when we kick off 2023 with our first show. So thanks for all of that. Everybody do exactly what Craig says. You go to Facebook, you like us, you come in every Wednesday at noon Pacific, and you'll get to watch a great show. Our next show is Wednesday, December the 14th. Our guest will be leadership expert Jen Hope. My co-host that week will be Linda Popke. In the meantime, be safe, be well, be prosperous, and try to get out of those conflicts once in a while, or else call Carol, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.